Good evening, everybody. Does this work well enough? You can hear me okay? Yeah. Yes, no? Okay. So thank you for coming together. You know me, I'm Mike Cahill, I'm your mayor. Let me just acknowledge a few of our other local elected officials who are here. Ward 2 City Councilor Estelle Rand, thank you, Councilor. Where's Councilor Hausman? Ward 4 City Councilor Scott Hausman, and am I missing any? Oh, I'm sorry, and City Councilor at Large, Julie Flowers. Thank you all for being here. Is there anybody here from the local media? Well, from any media. Are there any media people here? Yes, you're with, is that Dustin? It is. Okay, good to see you. Dustin, Salem News. Okay, and we've got BevCam with us. So, thank you for coming together quickly. After the other day's DPU hearing and several of you reaching out with concerns, particularly concerns about the EMF question. It seemed to be important to get together quickly. So we put this conversation together tonight. And then yesterday I got a phone call from one of the National Grid folks, and they are looking to have a public, what they're calling a public open house, public meeting, call it what you want, 2 weeks from tomorrow. They're looking to meet on the 27th. They're planning to do that virtually in a Zoom. And so we'll get that out on the city website, and I believe they are going to be reaching out right through the, through the planned corridor of the job. So you should hear directly from them on that meeting, but just know now it's the evening of Wednesday, October 27th.
Got a time, Mike, on that?
I don't. I'm going to guess 7, but I shouldn't guess. It'll be that evening, I know that. As soon as we know that detail, we'll put it up. And we'll share it out with you folks as well. So this project, I think, let me just give you a couple of the details. This is the project itself is a necessary project. There are two 115 kV electric lines that run through Beverly and that service Beverly and points north through Gloucester and Rockport. They are what provide our power, our electricity. For the last 50 years, the line in question is one of two that has run down the MBTA right-of-way. We've got a slide that will, you want to put up the, I'm sorry, this is Jocelyn Ruel-Kursker, she's the Chief of Staff in my office. And this is Mike Collins, our Commissioner of Public Services. And so they're here to help me try to answer some questions as we get into a conversation. But maybe, Jocelyn, you want to put up the slide that shows that cross-section of the right-of-way. So right now, the line that is needing to be replaced was built in 1970 or 71, and it runs along. If you're looking at, this is the tracks going northbound. And to the left of the line is the cable that's in the ground now that needs to be replaced. To the right of the train tracks overhead is the other 115 kV line that is currently the main line, the primary line, because the old line failed back in the spring. And National Grid has been trying to get it back up and running, make the necessary repairs to get it running for the meantime until this new line is built. As a result, we don't currently have, and by we I mean the whole of Cape Ann from Beverly on up, don't have that redundancy so that if power goes out on one line, it's still there in the other. So what's happening currently is when there's a bad storm forecast, Grid is bringing a bunch of equipment up and staging it in Beverly and hoping that a tree doesn't take out the overhead line. That's where we are currently. So I know we'll get to the conversation about all the things you want to ask about and express your concerns about. And I know, I think I already said it, I know that, I shouldn't say I know, it seems that the main concern has to do with the safety of the line and the question of electromagnetic fields. I'm not going to try to speak to it. Number one, this is Grid's project, it's not the city's, but number two, there are experts in this, none of us are. Grid plans, and when I spoke with them this morning, I said, that's good, you'd better. They're planning to bring experts to talk about the study that they did in preparation for this project. But so to go back to what you see there, there's a lot of infrastructure in the ground. We pushed grid for most of the first year of the conversation on this, saying, why can't you go up the right-of-way? You should go up the right-of-way. You know, the line comes off the railroad bridge across the harbor. The reason it went up the right-of-way, you know, for the last 50 years is it's direct to that East Beverly substation, which, if you know where Camp Paradise is? Where Cole Street and Foster Street and Boyle Street all meet at those tracks. That's where that East Beverly station is. That's where this line goes to. And that's where the new line will go to. So we pushed them for a while, and we kept pushing, and eventually all the information came back was that it wasn't going to work to put anything additional, any new infrastructure in that line. They need to defend that with you. 2 weeks from now, you know, you can have that conversation with them directly. But I'll just, you know, what you see there is the overhead line. You see the cable to the left. There's a lot of other MBTA infrastructure, and most recently you've heard about that federal requirement of putting positive train controls in. That's a safety feature required by the Federal Railroad Administration, being implemented all over the country. And then Commissioner Collins can talk a little more if you need more detail, but for a couple of stretches of the way, there's a city drainage pipe that runs under city streets, but then picks up the railroad and runs along the railroad downtown for part of the stretch. And there's also is it the 23 kV, Mike? Is a 23 kV line, which is a lower line, a smaller line that is within the overall, that brings power to some parts of the line, of this section, that also runs on the right-hand side. So there's city drainage pipe under that overhead line. There's the 23 kV under that overhead line. There's on the left side of the tracks northbound, there's both the existing underground cable that has to be replaced and other MBTA equipment. And for a whole lot of reasons, they kept making the case that it couldn't work to go in that space. At a certain point, we kept pushing, they kept pushing back. The case they made had us say, okay, we see that it can't go down that line, so now what are you going to do to make sure that the community is safe in what you install? And there were a number of things that are in the memorandum of agreement that we negotiated with Grid that was a requirement of this whole project. Yes, Alyssa?
I'm just hearing you say they need to defend that to you. You're saying they, third-party National Grid, need to defend that to you.
I mean,
Let me just finish.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm concerned that at this stage, you saying that they just reached a tentative decision last week.
yes.
Aren't we?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, we need, sorry.
So I'll repeat. Can you hear me? I'm repeating back your comment. They need to defend that to you. You're referring, I assume, to National Grid.
Yes.
They need to defend the safety of this project to you, the residents. We are already past a tentative agreement. Where was the defense of us residents during the last 3 to 4 years of this process?
Right.
Let's back up.
Sure. So again, I think a lot of this conversation is best had 2 weeks from tomorrow, because we can have it now too. I'm just saying that there has been a process. By law, they've been required to conduct a process. We pushed them again and again and again to do more outreach than required. They did outreach. I don't know who did and didn't get notice. I want them to lay it all out there, because it was all challenged and questioned before the DPU. But we required that they make sure that they reach out in a number of different ways. They had a public meeting in 2018. I was there, Councilor Hausman was there. You know, we thought that they did the right kind of outreach, and the turnout was very low. They did another meeting in 2019 at the Cove Community Center that, I don't know who here was there, but okay, so there were people in the room that night. In both of those settings, they would have talked about their preferred route, which is what they brought to the DPU. And by the 2018 fall meeting, they had, I think it was dated 2018, they had, well, I shouldn't say that. They had come back with all of their rationale on the route and why the right-of-way wasn't going to be possible. They then did an EMF study. I'm not sure when that was completed, but we'll double-check the record. And at a certain point, they put that out there for public review and conversation. Okay, so let me say this. Let me say this. So Karen's shaking her head sideways. Let me take that back and say, I'm going to double-check when they submitted for us to first see that EMF study, because I believe, I'm going to just leave it at that. Let's check the record and see when the EMF study was completed, and then after that, it would have become available for conversation. Yes, Alyssa?
Yeah, so first of all, I didn't introduce myself properly. My name is Alyssa Raymond Reed. I use she, her pronouns. I live at 163 Lothrop. I've lived in Beverly for 11 years. I am a...
Oh, you know what?
I'll come up.
So here's the rub for the conversation in the room. Alyssa's using a microphone that BevCam will pick up. This is the microphone for inside the room. Unfortunately, there's two of them.
So I will talk into the microphone for BevCam.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard because I'm wearing a mask. I'll also talk as loud as I can for the room. Can you hear me in the back? So my name is Alyssa Raymond Reed. I live at 163 Lothrop Street. I've lived here for 11 years. I have 2 kids, a husband, 11 pets. I'm also a labor and civil rights and environmental attorney. I have a lot of questions about this project, most of which I have not been able to answer because I don't feel like I've been given access to documentation and process. I can go into that. I'm not going to make a speech, but my question that I don't feel was answered was, why is it that National Grid is responsible to us and not you? I want to know what you have done to research electromagnetic fields, specifically during the last public processes that you were attending. Can you give us a specific account of what questions you asked, what research you have done independently? I want citations to the research studies that have been conducted that you used to protect residents like me on Lothrop Street that are 20 feet from the proposed high voltage line. I also want to know what communications you made to City Council, who represents me and my interests. I want to know all of the different steps that you took to communicate with me and my community, to inform us of the risks associated with electromagnetic fields, the environmental risks potentially from this disruptive project, any potential disclosures we would have to make on our property values, now or in the future, what will happen if conclusory studies show a causal or relationship between cancer and this kind of high voltage line, what mitigation we will have. Bottom line, I want to feel like I can trust my elected officials to represent my health, my property, and just democratically speaking, transparency, disclosure of conflict of interest, adequate access to resources so I can educate myself, adequate information and preparation so you can represent me and my city councilors can represent me. We're here today not to hear a speech defending what is already seems like a fait accompli. We're here to make sure that our rights are protected, our children's health is protected, and our property values are protected. So I guess I did make a speech. I would like to spend most of our time asking questions and not being given, answers that you've had time in an on-level playing field to prepare after a process that did not adequately inform the citizens of what was about to come. Can I hand this to?
So Alyssa, you asked me a number of questions just then. If you'd work with me after this meeting to make sure that I have them all clear, I'll try to answer all of them, okay? Okay, thanks. So Alyssa pretty much said that you folks want to start talking, so I'll stop.
Is there more you wanted to present, Mike, before we, if there's more that you wanted to present, I think we could hear that, but we do have a number of questions. I mean, one of them that, well, I don't want to go into them. Do you want to present anything more?
No, I mean, let's have a conversation. What I was going to say is we pushed them on the right-of-way. They and the MBTA came back with a set of arguments that it wasn't going to work. They can better explain those to you than I can. And they, as I said, I didn't reach out to them over the weekend or Monday. They called me and said they want to have a public meeting 2 weeks from tomorrow. So that, on that. And on the EMF question, you know, we pushed them on that. We pushed them on how they were going to construct most safely. And they produced an EMF study, which, you know, we got an agreement from them that we could do it, that they would help fund a third-party peer review. We have not yet concluded that. We've not done that peer review. We tried to find somebody to do it. It's really hard to find somebody in that field. We're looking, again, to try to find a firm to do that.
Is it still possible to stop the actual construction, the digging, until both the EMF study and the general engineering study, and I don't remember the numbers, but there's hundreds of thousands of dollars that we're allowed to spend to do studies, until those studies have been concluded, rather than to start right away, which is what they're planning to start digging pretty soon? Is that possible?
So I spoke with them this morning, and I said, you know, what do you think you're going to be doing in the next 2 weeks between now and the meeting that you're trying to schedule? And they said they would be most likely just doing some test pits, because they've got to do some of that around the, you know, the where there's ledge, where there isn't. As far as money that's been committed in the MOA by them, the engineering, Mike, is for us to really, that $200,000 for engineering.
During construction.
That's during construction. That's for us to have a check on them to make sure they do the construction properly. Is that right?
Yeah, to assist us, so if we're not able to be out in the field all the time, but we could have somebody on our behalf if necessary.
Okay. So we'd bring somebody on for that purpose. So that the up to $20,000 on the third-party peer review is more relevant to what you're asking.
Okay.
And so I'll follow up with that tomorrow with you. I'll check on that. Yes, Jim?
So, sorry to take this, I know there's other questions, but very quick one. Since you're talking about the EMF study at Jim Younger, 32 Butman Street, I understand in looking at the MOA, and I'm not a lawyer, but it basically gives a budget of $20,000 to conduct that study. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of language in there that suggests that the consultant, doesn't suggest, it actually mandates that the consultant that is hired to do that study be approved by National Grid. Is that correct?
So yes, and we talked about that this morning. If we were to find somebody and they were not to want us to use that person and we thought that was the right person to use, then we'll spend from another line in our own budget to do it.
Okay, just a quick follow-up question then. At this point, that consultant has not been hired.
No, when we first got a look at the EMF study, we started looking around for a consultant. And I will tell you that from what we found thus far, it's hard to find. We've gone to some of the, some of the larger engineering companies. We've gone to the places that would seem to make sense to go to. The former chief of staff, Kevin Hartunian, was able to connect with somebody at a firm in New York and have an initial conversation and get some kind of off-the-record feedback that hadn't looked at the EMF study, but said that the things that we were asking them for and how they might construct were best practices to minimize concerns around EMFs.
So no study has been done to
Not-
date?
not yet.
And would you accept recommendations from citizens in this room?
Absolutely.
For
We're really trying to
contractors and
find somebody
consultants who would do that
Yeah.
EMF study?
Yeah,
That's wonderful.
yeah, thanks.
And you can tell me who you want to take questions from, because I'm not the guy.
Do
Just the
do you
BevCam
mind, Jim?
mic.
If you don't
Oh, I
mind
will,
moving
if you
around with the mic?
Hi, Karen Fogarty, 169 Lothrop Street. Mr. Mayor, the problem with the EMF study that hasn't been performed yet, and the problem with the meeting with National Grid on the 27th, is that the siting board issued its final decision on October 8th, but the decision is dated the 8th. And we have exactly 20 days to appeal to the SJC. That's the only recourse. This decision has been made. We had an opportunity. We tried to slow the process down at the hearing, saying that there were outstanding questions that had not been resolved and were of great concern to the residents. And unfortunately, you indicated that there had been, this is fully vetted and there was robust communication with the community about this issue. And I felt like your comments at the public hearing held a lot of weight with the siting board. And now we're in a position where National Grid conveniently wants to come and talk to us on the 27th, when we don't really have an opportunity after the 27th to prepare a legal response if we are going to make one. And it seems like there's this thought process in this room that the city has some ability to stop this project from going forward. And I don't think that's the case, because you've entered into a memorandum of agreement with NEP that was just waiting for the siting board decision. So it seems like we're stuck, and I'm really unhappy about that.
So I'll say one thing. If you folks want a meeting with National Grid to happen more quickly, to give more time for that deadline to be addressed, I'll tell them that tomorrow. I'll tell them tomorrow you want them here quicker.
Would that change our legal prospects?
Well, Karen just talked about a deadline for an appeal, and as she was saying, 20 days, that would be the day after the meeting that they're scheduling. So, we can say to them that's not quick enough, get here sooner, to have that conversation with neighbors, and you'll know better after that meeting.
Can I ask another question
Yeah,
that
of
relates
course, of
to
course.
the delay? There's not only the decision from the siting board, which basically gives us until the 28th of October, but there's also the MOA itself that could be nullified today, because it states, you signed it in March of 2020, and it states that you had 180 days for construction to begin. And even with COVID, there is no reasonable excuse for the delay that's occurred. In fact, it's really an opportunity, because now you have a defunct, dead, underground, high-voltage line that it's not working. And the original design was essentially that they would create redundancy and by putting in this new underground line, and then they would take the existing underground line that's running along the railroad tracks and remove it after the fact. But right now, that line is defunct. So why not save the ratepayers' money, get everything you want, save the community, and essentially put the new line, in the same location as existing right-of-way? And I know you said this was a question for National Grid, but no, you have the power. 180 days. You can nullify this agreement right now. Anybody else?
Mike, do you? Jim, I'll have to go look at that
Michael-
term you're
Michael,
pointing
how
out
are
in the MOA. Sorry, go ahead.
All right, the line that they're replacing, I go over and I talk to them an awful lot. And I know in the flyers that we got, plus their website, plus what they told you guys, seems to be a little bit different story when you're actually over there talking to the workers. And if you recall, several years back, we had the explosion over on Weber Avenue on that high voltage line. The line that they're replacing is full of oil, which continually leaks into the ground on Weber, going down Wellman and going down River Street. Are you aware of that? Mike?
I'm sorry, when was
Huh?
there an explosion on Weber?
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
What was this question? I believe, Michael, it was about 8 years. I had a news crew in front of my house, and the patch over there is still in the, across the street, and a lot of the North Shore lost power because of it. It was during a thunderstorm, I believe, in kind of the summer, but it was a while back.
all right, I'll follow that up with you, Mike, sorry.
So,
your,
but
your,
the
your
line that-
question was about the leaking of oil on the line
Right.
that exists.
They're
And-
always the guys are always out there testing. I see them, I ask them all the time. The line that they're actually replacing is this line that's full of oil. So the guy, when I talked to them this morning, they said, well, we're going to put the new line in, and we're going to leave this line there. And the oil's still going to leak. So what management tells the city, and these lovely flyers that we got and these little things we got through the door and the website, versus the workers, are actually two different stories. And I appreciate going over and talking to these guys every time I see them and they're digging up the street, and I learn more from them than I do from the literature and we'll just say things that have been glossed over for all of us to swallow. You know what I mean? So, like I said, the explosion was across the street. That's how I found out there was oil in the line. And then when I talked to them this morning, I was talking to them about the same thing because they're doing probes in that very same line to see what's going on with it, plus oil. Now, here's the catch. There's nobody in America that can fix this line. The person that fixed the line during the explosion had to come from England because he's the last guy in the world that knows how to fix this. So, like I said, we're going to get this new line, but we're still going to have an existing EPA problem underneath the street. Plus it's leaking EMFs, which they told me today. And I was like, great. I even told her right after I found out from them when I walked across the street. So, you know, these are some things that you guys need to look into because we're going to leave a pollution problem underneath the ground. And what they're telling you versus what these workers say are two different stories. You know what I mean? If you come up and actually talk to the workers, Michael, you'll find out there's a whole different side. But come up in casual clothing when you talk to them, and they'll tell you. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Estelle Rand. I live on Agate Street, and I'm also the city councilor for Ward 2. So I'm hearing a lot of basically sharing about how National Grid has not always been a good neighbor. And so that's, I think, part of the baseline energy of this whole process is that they tend to not be great neighbors to us. But I wanted to ask really, especially while we have Commissioner Collins in the room, so parts of this project were not required to go through the siting board process, namely in Goat Hill. And I'm wondering if is that gonna start immediately because it wasn't even part of the siting board decision? What's the time frame for the Weber, Wellman, River Street kind of part of this project?
I know that they're looking to do work on that end of the project first. I knew that much. Anything to add to that, Mike?
No, we don't have a specific schedule from them other than as the mayor pointed out, they wanted to, first thing to do is try to start to install some manholes.
To do what for them?
See, install manholes.
To install some new manholes.
And the manholes, that's significant. What we can do, councilors, is I've got to call them tomorrow morning, clearly on a number of things. let's make sure before I leave tonight, we've got that question clear, and I'll make that one of the first ones I ask him in the morning.
And just
We'll
as
follow up.
a follow-up, it sounds like there's potential to pause this whole project, which I know National Grid does not find ideal. I think you have a room full of people who would breathe a sigh of relief and feel like they have more time to figure that out. I understand the project has been sort of in the works especially from the National Grid side for years, but part of those years were pandemic years. So I feel like, that's a huge part of why we're not as informed. We only received one presentation on the council 2 years ago, and then there was a pandemic. So I think, pausing the project is not an unreasonable request. I don't know how often the siting board meets, but I think that they would probably find some time to meet again in the future if it meant finding a solution for their project. I guess my concern is, even if you were able to pause the project, would that apply to the areas on Goat Hill that were not part of the siting board
Right.
ruling?
Right.
So that's kind of, I don't know if if those roads would be worked on regardless. It doesn't make sense to start the project without completing it, but I'm also not sure that National Grid would be a good neighbor and pause everything because they,
Right.
don't have the full permitting.
Let's see if we can get that answered tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay. Jim, up here?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. My name is Jim Rome. I was a resident of Weber Avenue for about 13 years, still own the property there. And my concerns are basically about what Weber Avenue has underneath it. Right now, it has a defunct electrical line that they're going to replace, and right now, National Grid is pushing very hard to start the new project, get rid of the old thing and get the new one in, and they're trying to do it as quick as possible, the reason being that their system is failing, and it's been failing for 10 years. My issue is the fact that they're running everything down Weber Avenue. It's not just the electrical line. There is a huge, there's a natural gas line that is right next to it on the same street that also feeds Gloucester and the rest of the city. Basically, all the energy that is supplied to Beverly and the North Shore, be it electricity or gas, is running through Weber Avenue, a plain little ordinary sleepy street, which can become a tremendous target. 2 small sticks of dynamite, properly placed, could basically wipe out most of the electricity and power and gas for the North Shore. One of the things that National Grid did not do is, under my recommendation, was to move part of the cable that goes down Weber Avenue over to River Street, which is no more populated than the other street is. And that was completely ignored. There wasn't even a mention of it. And I was an intervener. I was sitting on the siting board for the past year. Okay? It wasn't even mentioned. So yes, they are arrogant. And they really should be knocked down a punch or two. And the other point is that we have this area there, which is basically a terrorist site. If they wanted to do something, they could do it. There are other reasons too, like having a gas leak affecting the cable, or the cable affecting the gas leak. The two together could create a local error. But the other one, the terrorist issue, I think is much more important. And that's all I have to say. Oh, one more thing. As far as the EMF is concerned, I am an electrical engineer. And with a piece of paper and a pencil and a little computer program, I can basically draw most of the lines of magnetic fields around these units. It's not a big deal to do. The problem is, for most places, the problem is how much electric field makes a difference on the human being. And I have no idea of that, and I've seen numbers, I don't know what they mean. And that is the first issue that has to be answered, is what is the target number that has to be obtained in order to be safe according to whatever standards people want to take.
Anybody else? Mike still or Scott?
So my name is Scott Hausman. I'm counselor, city councilor for Ward 4. Could you stand up? Yeah, sure. Scott Hausman, city councilor for Ward 4. I've had this conversation with the mayor, and I've had this conversation with the siting board at last week's hearing. I don't, frankly, have a good reason to trust what National Grid says, because, as the mayor indicated, they presented to the city council 4 years ago, back in 2018, and they held an open house shortly thereafter. I introduced myself to the representative from National Grid. It was very clear. I gave him my card that I was a city councilor, and I asked to be included in all of the notices that were relevant to this project that would affect Ward 4. I found out later that they held a meeting at the Cove Community Center in the heart of my ward, never told me. As far as I know, they never told the mayor's office either. I heard about it from a constituent who attended, who said, basically, where were you? And I spoke with National Grid about that and said that is unacceptable. You can't have communications with my constituents without keeping me in the loop. Unfortunately, National Grid continued to do just that. As a result, they really, their representatives have no credibility with me. And while I fully support the need for a resilient, modern electrical grid as we try to address climate change and be more resilient, National Grid has certainly put me in a position where I can't trust what they're saying, because even on the most basic of things, like simply reaching out to me and communicating with me, they were unable or unwilling or decided not to do that. So I'm not real happy about the terms of the MOA, the memorandum of agreement, as it relates primarily, it seems to my reading, to address how we can improve or restore our roads and sidewalks, our infrastructure, our physical infrastructure, primarily. That seems to be the thrust of the document. But it doesn't really seem to address the residents. It addresses the city's infrastructure, but not the impact or ways to address or to educate or reassure or to mitigate issues around the residents and their concern about public safety. Now, I'm not a technical person, and so far, because the time frame here has been very short, there's been very little opportunity for me to try to inform and educate myself about whether the electromagnetic forces would be a concern or not be a concern. But I'm not willing to take National Grid's word for it, given the way they have conducted themselves so far with regard to their communications with me. So, Mr. Mayor, what I would suggest or request, as I did at the siting board, is for there to be strenuous efforts to try to pause this process that seems to be basically already approved, other than the appeal process, so that myself, my fellow councilors, the residents can feel more comfortable, if they're going to feel comfortable at all, and educate themselves and ourselves around the potential impacts of the electromagnetic forces. So I have absolutely no basis to form an opinion or a judgment on it. So, as you know, I'm a lawyer, but I'm not a litigator. But my understanding, at least in litigation, is that if the other side is acting in good faith or feels like they have no choice, they can waive an appeal process, waive an appeal period deadline by agreement to extend the appeal period. So I would request to determine whether or not technically from a litigation point of view that's possible, number one, and if it is, then ask National Grid if they would show good faith to agree to extend the appeal period to some date that we, to be determined, to enable all of us to sort of catch up with the process. Thank you.
How you doing? I'm Justin D'Amato. I live at 174 East Lothrop Street. I'm here speaking on behalf of many of my neighbors who could not make this meeting on such short notice. I have a little written thing I'm going to read right now. Please bear with me. We are concerned about the proximity of the high voltage cable in relation to our home. There have been studies suggesting exposure to the type of electromagnetic fields high voltage power lines generate and links to childhood leukemia and cancer. The International Agency for Research on Cancer, which is a part of the World Health Organization, classified ELF, extremely low frequency, magnetic fields as being possibly carcinogenic. The location of this cable is being run so close to our house and through miles of residential housing that over 500 households will be living within this magnetic field, in our homes and yards 24 hours a day, not by choice and many unknowingly. Our property will be within 20 feet of this proposed cable, and many families are much closer than that. I am scared for my family's future health and well-being if this high voltage power line is installed directly in front of our home. I have questions also. Is it safe to have high voltage power lines and the electromagnetic fields they produce sited so close to residential households? What is a safe human exposure level to EMF, which is measured in milligauss? How much exposure will the abutters be exposed to? If your exposure levels are safe, and supposedly there's been studies to look at that, where is your evidence of this and why has it not been distributed to the abutters and the community? The memorandum agreement between the City of Beverly and National Grid, which was signed by the mayor on March 26, 2020, on page 8, the electromagnetic field, there's a fund that the city requests for an independent EMF expert to review the analysis performed. National Grid was to pay $20,000 for this independent review. Where is this review? The siting board has already voted on this on October 6th. The horse has already left the barn. Where's the review? Shouldn't that review have been done prior to a vote? Dean Hazel of the Energy Facilities Siting Board said at the meeting on Wednesday, October 6th, and he's a member of the Energy Facilities Siting Board, that there are no Massachusetts or federally set levels for what is an acceptable magnetic field exposure. So here's one of the people who are on the actual siting board, and we're like, we kind of don't know, but we're going to stick it in your yard anyways. What are the precautionary measures that would be used to minimize exposure to magnetic fields from transmission lines? My understanding is that there is nothing to mitigate exposure, only distance from the source. Well, the source is going to be placed right in front of your homes. We believe also that this high voltage power line's proximity to our homes will also dramatically hurt our home values. Most of our neighbors along the primary route had no idea this proposed project is underway or what it entailed. I believe the methods of communicating to the public were intentionally designed for low community awareness and attendance. Very few potential resident stakeholders can be expected to read through all the proposal information, gather knowledge on the topic, and reasonably communicate their concerns while working full-time and raising a family. I believe this is on purpose, and this is probably a playbook National Grid does everywhere. We're not special. I would like to ask the City of Beverly and National Grid to please reconsider your recommendation for choosing the primary route and reevaluate using the MBTA commuter rail right-of-way footprint for this high voltage power line. The old one has been there in this spot for 40 years, relatively undisturbed. And also, they mention that a third-party contractor hit this thing repeatedly. I'm sorry, it's National Grid and the MBTA. If I want to put a mailbox in my front yard, I got to call DigSafe. You're telling me that those two gigantic organizations didn't call DigSafe? They hit the power line that basically affects the entire North Shore? Are you kidding me? It seems logical to use the existing footprint even if it's a little more expensive and less convenient to do so. National Grid is a huge multinational corporation with a market cap this afternoon of $44 billion. I'm sure they're very capable of doing this. Repeatedly in the tentative decision, they refer over and over and over again to the lowest possible cost. Well, they consider all of us to be the lowest possible cost. The lowest possible cost for a project is not always the best solution. Thank you very much.
This gentleman over here. And then...
I wanted to speak to Jim's comment about the 180-day provision that was mentioned in the MOU. It sounds like from what you said that if that is in fact a trigger that's inside the MOU, can't we affect that? Can the city not affect that and stop the whole process, and we determine the outcome and the forward motion on this, as opposed to talking about a meeting that they want to happen a day after the 20-day waiting period is over? I mean, if you can't read what they're trying to do, and as Justin just said, they have done this 1,000 times. I'm sure, we're all sure it's a playbook. So the question is, if there's a 180-day provision, it's been met, exceeded, how do we trigger that?
I'll defer to Tim first, yeah.
Well, I would like to amplify what Josh and what Justin have just said and comment on what Jim Younger pointed out. In a way, we're in luck because there is a provision that allows us to say that because work was not started within 180 days, I would call on our city council and our mayor to stand up and say, you know, it may seem like a legal issue that we're impinging on, but guess what? You didn't start, let's start over, let's find out. I am at 165 Lothrop Street. I've been there since 1974. I love Beverly, I love what we do in this city, and I love our representative government. And I really believe we ought to be able to find a solution to shut this down. We don't know, there are a number of us, my neighbors, whose homes are built on ledge. When that ledge goes from across the street and then down towards Orchard Street, and when they start digging that up, they're going to have to blast some of that ledge. And they ought to be studying, are we going to have radon that is going to be released? We're going to start disturbing all of that when we already have an existing line that could be used, and it might be a little more expensive, but I'm really convinced tonight and hoping that we will find a way to say, stop, let's take the time. We can all now talk together in a room. It's not COVID as bad right now. And let's decide what we really need to do. So I really would like to support what others have said. Thank you.
I'm Julie Flowers. I'm one of your at-large city councilors, which is a fancy way of saying I represent the whole city, so wherever you live, I'm one of your at-large councilors. Some of the comments that I wanted to share have been very eloquently made already, but I did want to return to something that Justin had mentioned, which was that when I was on the siting board hearing, which Councilor Hausman mentioned, it was extremely long. It was 10 a.m. till 4 p.m., and there were many residents in this room who were on it as well. But it did concern me because it makes me think about how difficult that is for anybody in this room to rearrange their lives to be part of that. And if that's a piece of the public process, it didn't provide an accessible public process. And I think, that's an important part of government. It's something I think at the municipal level, Mr. Mayor, colleagues in the room, that's something that should be important to us, is important to us. And so an unfair, inaccessible public process strikes me as not a public process at all. And I think that's part of the reason why people have come together in this room, because now they have the opportunity to talk to those of us who represent them here in Beverly. And I think, it's not uncommon in a city for not everyone to agree all the time. But I will say, as a city councilor, the feedback, the comments, the concern, the fear that I've been hearing from people is pretty uniform along this route. And to me, that gives me pause and really does make me want to just amplify the request that we find a way to pause until we can get meaningful data and about the safety and the health. Sorry, I didn't catch your name on Weber. Jim, I wanted to say Jim, and then I really didn't want to be wrong. When you said, I can draw the lines around a project, but I don't necessarily know how to tell you what that means for the health of a human being. I was struck by that on the siting board as well. Justin referenced it. It was mentioned that in Massachusetts and the United States, there really is no set safe level of exposure. It was mentioned that World Health Organization does have levels that we could look to, but anytime that there's not a safe level of exposure, I think that should give us pause and try to pause and figure out what is the data and how are we going to evaluate it. And I think that's what I hear residents in this room asking for. And so, I just want to add my voice to supporting that request that we do that together as a community and do that for our residents.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Ed Bryant, 56 Cross Lane. I was at the meeting at the community center, and then didn't hear anything about this at all. And then I got some sort of card from National Grid, and I looked at the map, and I couldn't find Cross Lane on it. I couldn't find Hale Street on it. It was not informative at all. So just want to give you a heads up as far as come to this meeting. I feel like I've been hoodwinked, that all of a sudden National Grid is coming in with something that nobody in the city has really looked at. So I just want to have you reconsider, please.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eric Boker. I live at 171 Lothrop Street. I am an engineer. Unfortunately, I'm not a transmission lines or power engineer, but I can read technical reports. And although I haven't had a lot of time to look at this report, from what I've read, I do have a number of questions which I hope will get answered as soon as we have the full meeting. But one thing that really struck me as odd is the EMF study and then the city review of the EMF study. And like Justin mentioned, like this should have, to me, that, I'm not a lawyer, but I would have assumed that this would have happened before anything got approved, and it hasn't. And we haven't even found someone to review the document. Assuming that we do, I don't even know what happens if we don't, but assuming that we do, and they provide feedback, good or bad, but specifically if it's negative feedback, I'd like to understand what the city's then recourse is. It's like, okay, well now National Grid is a year into this project, and we reviewed the study and we said, whoa, that's no good. That's going to have significant effects. I'd like to understand more about, like, if that's another avenue that can be explored. We won't know until that's reviewed to begin with. Thank you.
Mike Coughlin, 136 Essex Street. Been listening to everyone chat, and early on, Mayor Cahill, you started the process, and you mentioned that National Grid had concerns with running through the existing lines down the train tracks. And that's great. I still haven't heard what their concerns are. I don't hear what their problems are yet. I get that they're 40 or 50 years in this process. Their lack of planning and future enhancements shouldn't be the cause for why these lines have to go in the street. I get that they are mitigating it temporarily right now with our single point of failure for the North Shore. That, again, is their issue, not ours. So I question, and I hear the MOA has a 180-day clause. Seems like that should be enacted on, pause the process, and then figure out why they have a problem running down the train tracks.
Hi, everyone. My name is Justin. I live on Thomas Road, but I also own property in Goat Hill, so two affected areas. I also work for a consulting firm that works in energy. We work with a lot of utilities. We do a lot of these types of studies. I'll reach out to people in my company to see if there's anything that we know, if we have any experts on this field. But I can tell you from experience that there is absolute reason to be concerned about any, so to speak, study that is done and performed by National Grid or any other utility for that reason. What Justin alluded to earlier, there is 100% a playbook for forcing these things into communities. And it sounds like we're in the middle of one right now. It obviously, I mean, we've talked a lot about the existing lines going down the train track. I don't know what the reasoning is. Mayor Cahill hasn't said anything about that, but it most likely comes down to money, right? It's just time and money. So I think we could talk about this till we're blue in the face, but I think what we need to focus our efforts on right now is any possible opportunity to delay this process, to get studies done that we feel are third-party vetted and accurate to whatever extent they can be. There's a lot of concerns. One concern that a lot of the electromagnetic field stuff, like that's definitely a concern. One thing that I haven't heard, and the only reason I'm bringing this up is because I haven't heard it yet, is that it sounds like they've done repairs to this line consistently over the last 40 years. So one thing to consider here is that we're not only approving this initial project, we're approving all of the subsequent repairs that they will have to do over the next 20 to 30 years to maintain this line going through our neighborhoods, and what that's going to mean for the infrastructure and things like that. So again, I think our efforts need to be focused on finding a way to delay this process as long as we can, to get studies done that we feel are accurate. Because everything else, if we can't delay the process, if we can't slow the train down, we can talk till we're blue in the face, it doesn't matter. So I think that's where we need to focus our efforts on, and I would like the mayor's support in doing that, whether it's getting National Grid on the phone tomorrow and telling them that they've got some serious problems here and we need to pump the brakes on this project, get the word out, and do some accurate studies in the meantime. Thank you.
And I want to say one thing to follow up. I know I'm just passing the mic around, but I think it's an important point because you made it earlier, Mr. Mayor, that when you actually get on the phone with National Grid tomorrow and you pause this project, you basically put the brakes on, you need to ask them to triple or quadruple the budget they have of that $20,000. I can tell you that is not a lot of money for a consultant, especially if you're going to go to New York or somewhere and find someone that actually has some knowledge to actually talk about the EMF issue. So.
Thanks. Greg Harris, 161 Lothrop Street. Mr. Mayor, I was looking at the documentation provided by National Grid to the board in terms of trying to find raw information on the EMF emissions. There's a little table in there that references a study. However, I checked the website that they set up for this project that the city has encouraged them to. The study isn't posted there. They have updated it since the board meeting to include a link to that PDF with the EMF data, but there was no data on that website beforehand. From what you mentioned earlier, it sounds like the city has a copy of this study and has seen it. My question to you is, will the city make this information that it apparently has copies of public for us to review, since National Grid has not in this case?
Yeah.
It seems like there's this documentation and perhaps more that would be useful for us to understand this project that no one has access to right now.
Yeah, yeah. Everything we've got is public record. So whatever
public
we
record
got
is
you
fine,
can-
but if it's not publicly accessible, like
Right.
So the town of Wakefield had a similar line run, right? And their city website has the study that was done available. It's in a Google search, right? None of that is available here in Beverly, so.
Okay, yeah, that's good. We'll get it, try to get them to put it on their site, and we'll try to get it accessible to you as well, on our site, if it makes sense. Yeah, I've got to go back and look and see exactly what we have. Yep, thanks.
Hi, good evening. My name is Beth Almeida. I live at 7 Endicott Street. We are neighbors, at City Hall at least during your work hours. I would just like to echo the comments and the strong urging of the mayor, to the mayor and the city council to slow this process down, and to seek legal counsel on the ability to trigger the 180-day suspension of the MOA. I talked last week at the siting board hearing. I'm one of the few people in our community, I know, that I'm blessed and fortunate that I could spend an entire day prior, reading a 148-page technical document. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a lawyer, but I have an education, and I did my best to understand what was supposed to be a communication that would justify to the public, to the affected public, why this project was going forward. There are such basic informational gaps. And to the previous speaker and my neighbor in Beverly here, I think there's a difference between saying, well, it was disclosed versus it's available to the public. Those are two different things. As I was giving my comments last week to the siting board, I got a little ring-ding ditch, literally during my comments, and I went downstairs afterwards, and I know other people did because I was texting with lots of my neighbors, and I got this pamphlet on my door, and I read it with great interest. Now, I understand there's only so much you can put on a one-pager. However, construction process, very sanitized compared to the 148-page document, what I learned in that. If I read this pamphlet, it says, I can expect to see contractors cutting the asphalt road surface with trench excavation, and there will be an underground conduit, blah, blah, blah. It sounds pretty minor and benign, thank you. Now, I asked the question at the siting board hearing. I read all 148 pages. I learned about something called a manhole, which is basically equivalent to burying a school bus, if I understand the dimensions accurately, in the 148-page document. Now, I don't know where those manhole locations will be. I know from the 148-page document that there's going to be a dozen of them across this route. Is there going to be one in front of my house? Is there going to be one on the corner? I don't know where it is. It certainly wasn't on that microscopic map that we had from the initial siting board public notice that none of us could read. There's a difference between disclosure and information being accessible to the public. There are basic informational gaps that we as residents have not seen filled. And I'm having trouble finding the words for how strongly I want to urge you all, who are elected officials in this room and not in this room, to hit the pause button on this, because I cannot for the life of me see how this process can get to this stage that someone like me, who spent an entire day reading a 148-page document, preparing a written statement to read at a public hearing, which I participated in for hours, can still not know a basic fundamental question, like, am I going to have a school bus-sized structure buried in front of my house, which not only is going to be incredibly disruptive and potentially could damage my property, my foundation, but as I understand what little tiny minimal amount that the rest of us understand about these EMFs, that is the highest risk area along the line Where are these manhole structures going to be? Is that something that you can tell us? And was that part of your review, Mr. Mayor?
Is it clear, Mike? You're not sure?
Tim Averill again.
Yeah. I don't know that I can tell you exactly where they're going to be. Yeah. As you said, there are, I think, about a dozen. I think we know a couple of them are going to be on site at the River Street booster station, and the others are going to be along the route.
But that wasn't part of the information and due diligence that the city did in coming to the MOA. Is that correct?
Well, we know the length of the proposed route and the fact that they need a certain number of these along the route based on the distance between them. But in terms of exactly where they're going to be, no.
Some of us made these posters for tonight, and I just wanted to make sure that it's on the record that people could understand that we do have a Gmail account, and when you sign into the Gmail account, which is reliableenergy101@gmail.com, you can then be informed of all the deliberations that we have going, all the deliberations that are being made, and whatever does come of the meeting tonight. I think we're all, I hear us, I haven't heard much dissent, and if there were, I'd love to hear that too. I'm a debating coach by profession. But tonight I'm not hearing a lot of debating. I think we're all asking our elected officials to use whatever means necessary to put the brakes on the project.
Can that be done with your level of understanding of where we are in the process? Can you pump the brakes? Can you do that?
I don't know, Justin. I've not been in a process like this, right? Haven't had one of these happen.
Do we have resources that can tell us where we can actually do this, like what we can actually achieve?
Well, that's,
how are we supposed to know where we can actually start
as,
this process?
as it was stated earlier, there is an appeals period that's currently running, right? Jim pointed out language in the MOA that I'm looking at, and I'm seeing that it's not a, it doesn't read as a unilateral ability to void, but it's an opportunity to reopen. And so if I'm reading that properly, we'll start that conversation tomorrow morning.
I want to ask, is your understanding that you have the ability in your role as mayor of the city of Beverly to halt the process?
I do not know the answer to that.
How can you enter into an MOA without knowing whether you have the power to end the MOA?
So we entered into this process in an attempt to best represent the needs of the community.
I want you to answer my question.
Well, why don't you, go ahead, please, go ahead.
I'm asking you whether you entered into an MOA without knowing your off-ramps to the MOA.
Well, you're asking two different questions. One, you asked earlier whether I could pause the process, right? That's a process with the DPU and the state.
It's with
and then you're asking me separately if I entered
EFSB.
into an MOA with a public utility that allows me to pause the process with the state DPU. Those are two different things.
Is it with the DPU or with the EFSB?
Wait, are you trying to trip me up?
I'm just asking.
Please,
I'm
please.
trying to, to be honest with
I'm
you.
here trying to understand, okay, how we can move when we all get up tomorrow morning. You folks want me to do some things. I'm trying to listen. I'm trying to figure it out. Okay?
I just want to finish a few things. I'm representing a lot of people tonight that were not able to come because this meeting was conducted last minute as a result of advocacy of a lot of wonderful community members and neighbors who are both directly impacted by this project, proposed project, and also care about the city of Beverly and their neighbors. This is not fully accessible, this meeting, even tonight. It's not being Zoomed. There has been process defects at every single level of the last 3-4 years of the initiation of this project. It's been done under the cover of the pandemic. And as Justin and many others have articulated so well, this is really the playbook of a Goliath company coming in to do their will in our community. I am asking very basic questions, and I don't like the tone that you're using when people are asking questions that we have the right to know the answer to when you're entering into a memorandum of agreement that affects our livelihood and our safety. I apologize if I sound angry, and I apologize if I sound upset. Those are both accurate portrayals of how I feel. I've lived here for 11 years. I want to understand specifically and not rhetorically, and not because you have a few weeks left until re-election, what is possible right now to stop this from going forward, given that I feel there have been deficiencies in the process that impact my very health. So I really resent that you are getting angry at me when I feel I have spent a lot of time advocating on behalf of my community to ensure our very safety. So we have a lot of questions, an hour-and-a-half meeting during a pandemic with masks on, without full access, after a decision is done, is absolutely deficient. I'm literally asking you what off-ramps we have, and to be specific about those off-ramps, so that we have the chance now to vindicate our rights and to be able to address the wrongdoings that have already occurred. If you are not prepared tonight, because you have not prepared adequately for this, for questions about the MOA or otherwise, then let's set up whatever needs to happen next, apart from or with National Grid, to ensure that as residents and citizens, we have the redress that we need to be able to advocate fully for our well-being. I think everyone here is unified in that.
I think that's fair. I don't think anyone here is trying to attack you, Mr. Mayor. I don't think, that's not, like, I don't think, I mean, not personally, not trying to do that. I realize that might be how it's coming across. But I think the point has been made, like, now you know the seriousness of the problem. Like, let's set some time aside to actually dig into some of these questions instead of us just throwing questions at you and you sort of having to backpedal. And, you know, it doesn't sound like we're getting anywhere right now, but let's set up something very soon to actually dig in here a little bit and get some answers.
Mr. Mayor, I know that the siting board approved the entire plan that NEP presented in its application. It had multiple parts to it. This is only one part of it. My question is, NEP has to have permission from the city of Beverly to dig into our streets. We have to give them that permission. And I think, but I'm not a lawyer, I would think that we hold the key to that permission. The siting board, DPU, can't compel the city to put this in the road, can it?
I'm going to write that down, Karen.
Because I feel like the city holds the key. We own the street, and if we're not satisfied with what National Grid proposes to put in the street, it's up to us to make it satisfactory or not allow it, regardless of whether the DPU has approved the whole project. That's a more global aspect. We can be more granular in our community, I would think, and I would expect it.
I also want to amplify that this is not a crucifixion tonight, and I hope that you're not feeling that way. I think what we all need to know is if you, when you and I talked a little earlier, we were talking about how National Grid was just, they just ruled out the idea of using the existing. And I think what I'm hoping you'll be able to say to National Grid is that your citizens, the ones you represent, have strongly come forward and said they're ruling out the plan that you have right here. Now, I'm not sure what the means will be. Karen suggested a great idea of, using the city's authority and not to allow it to dig. Jim has mentioned the 180-day clause, which may be a good way out. But I think one thing we'd all like to know is if you can represent us and get some kind of a response, then we will know whether we need, as private citizens, to hire a lawyer to get us to a point where we have an injunction against doing this, and also get some indemnification in terms of health and property values, because we could make this last a long time as individual citizens, but we'd much rather do it with you leading us that direction.
I'm Jackie Rolk, and I live at 73 Cross Lane, so this is going to go right in front of our house. And we were both at that meeting back at the community center. And as I recall, when National Grid lawyers and experts were speaking, their major problem with running it up the existing line was the disruption to the MBTA and people getting to work, and they could only work like 5 hours a day because they can't stop working and get off the tracks and let the trains go. How difficult would it really be to run Newport and Rockport with buses from Salem? They do it every time there's an outage. We're fairly new to Beverly. We've only been here 4 years. But we love it here. We think it's wonderful. We used to live down toward Providence, and I used to commute into the city. They know how to replace a train with a bus. It can be done. And these are two just out of Salem until they got out of the Goat Hill area in Beverly Station, and then I'm sure the North Station trains could run, North Beverly, and they could just run buses, probably 4 buses would do it to Rockport and Newburyport. I mean, they could work all day long, a regular work day, just by using buses. That was a massive thing to them.
And to her point, ridership on the MBTA is way down. In the last 10 years, you couldn't drive by on the parking lot and find a spot. She nailed it. There's hardly anybody taking the train now.
Those trains are important to the people who have to get to work, especially into the Boston hospitals and so forth. There's a lot of people who go into Mass General and the Brigham from here. But from Salem Station to either Newburyport or Rockport, that is a really easy bus route. It's not like you're going through the heart of Cambridge or, in places in Revere where it's really congested. From Salem out that's pretty darn easy. And it probably could be done with maybe 4 buses or 6 at the most.
Just going on what Teresa Ciavler, 109 Cross Lane, just going on what you said, they've been paving the roads down on 128 in Gloucester, and they work at night. Why don't they work at night?
Oh, no, this was my answer.
Okay.
have to take my mask out because I speak with an accent. So, okay. So, my name is Dr. Gotho, and I'm running against Mike. That is not why I'm here. I am a public health professional, and this is an issue of great interest to me. While National Grid may have studies that say EMFs have low risk to human beings, scientists have not conclusively found that they are none, and they continue to research. We don't know what they might find. And even if there was research to say that there are no risks to human beings, some human beings are more susceptible to EMFs than others. We may be in the same house, I don't feel anything, but the other person may have headaches or anything else. So I concur that lack of planning on National Grid's part does not mean an emergency on our part. And I also think that I had somebody asking Mike whether he can stop the process. While we have to think globally, we have to act locally. If Mike cannot stop the process, you, the people, have the power to stop the process. Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Matt DeSico. I'm from 178 Lothrop Street. Again, I'm here on behalf of a lot of my neighbors. You say you want us to trust National Grid. I have zero faith in National Grid. We're in the middle of a Zoom meeting. Quite frankly, they belittled Councilor Flowers, Councilor Houseman. It was very obvious that you guys had no information on this meeting whatsoever when it happened. While we were all on Zoom meetings, myself, Karen, Alyssa, all had somebody knock on our door while we're speaking with them on a Zoom conference. I find National Grid's business ethics to be unethical at best. You know, they've gone and you have a line that's totally compromised that didn't make national news because by the grace of God it was off, or there could have been up to 50 to 100 people dead instantly. It's just poor practice. They still have that same company doing work for them that's caused other incidents within the last few weeks. And you keep saying you want us to trust their word. Honestly, I'd like the city councilors, turn over every stone and find somebody to do these research, you know, on the EMFs and stuff like that, independently. I don't want somebody from National Grid or somebody that National Grid has approved, because I don't trust National Grid, period. I think the city has the power and the money and the funds to go find somebody. I know you said it's hard. I get it. During a pandemic, I can only imagine. But I would expect every stone to be turned to find somebody to do that. Aside from that, I'd want to know a ton of other things. They're gonna hit ledge. I can tell you right now, they're gonna hit ledge in my house. I can see it in my foundation. It's in my house. And I live on Lothrop Street. You can see the ledge through the whole neighborhood. Like, what geological studies have been done? There's no information that I've found saying that they've come down my street and found anything, but yet they want to dig a hole through 3.5 miles of this city. Like, this process needs to be stopped. I think you have the power to do that. And thank you for the elected officials that were on defending us. And not to crucify you, but every time I hear you speak, Mr. Mayor, it sounds like you're on National Grid's side under the guise of, I'm doing the best for the community. Whether that's true or not, I don't mean to crucify you on that, but when I hear you talk about this whole project, you really seem to be on their side. I also see no reason why it can't go down the existing line, especially, A, they shouldn't be leaving the existing line there that's compromised. That oil isn't only contaminant, it also, as far as I know, has PCBs in it, which are highly contaminated. That line should be removed, period, anyways. It shouldn't be left behind. It shouldn't be left there to rot, because that's nothing but a natural disaster waiting to happen. This city can do better, and I hope we do. Thank you.
There's a hand over there.
Well, he's coming around. I just want to say, I don't mean to come across, and I'm sorry if I came across as either defending or taking National Grid's position. I guess I've been trying to just give some of the context to how things have gone to date. But I hear your point, and I take it. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Gary. My name is Gary Ciavla. I am at Cross Lane, 109. First of all, Mr. Mayor, I think you've done a great job for the city. I just want to say that. And there are a lot of issues here. I agree with almost everything that everyone has said. I think that procedurally, you know, if you have 180 days in which to stop the process, or if you have the ability to stop the process because they haven't started within 180 days, then I think you should do that. If we have 20 days now to file a claim, I'm not sure who has standing to do that. I really haven't looked into that, but I'm a corporate lawyer, by the way, despite the disguise. So, you know, tolling agreements are negotiated all the time. If you get on the phone with them and say, you know, we need 6 months, then they should give us 6 months. One more point that I think is really funny. Nice young man came down the street the other day and was talking to us, National Grid rep, telling us all about the project. I didn't really know that much about it. I looked at the map and I said, why don't they run it down the train tracks like it was before? Oh, that's a big headache to deal with the MBTA, he said. That's not really a very good reason.
Hi, I'm Chuck Roke at 73 Cross Lane. So the new project is going to go right down my street. But I really wish someone had shown up and said the EMF is going to be worse than the EMF that's already in my house. So you put your kid in the crib and his head is 6 inches from where the electricity comes into your house. How much EMF has he got? Or you're standing in front of your microwave cooking dinner for hours on end, how much EMF you got there? Or you have the wires overhead, the 4 kV lines. You know, this is 115 kV, way bigger, right? Carrying a lot more current for all the houses, 60,000 homes, whatever. But it's 3 feet underground in a concrete duct bank. So if you found out that that duct bank is 1/10 of the EMF as your microwave, you know, are you going to stop using your microwave? Probably not. You'll just keep using it. So, I mean, it would be nice to have those numbers. And if you could get that,
Yeah.
it would really be good for all of us. Yeah, the other thing with the train line is that I'm an intervener in the process, and I was at the meeting the other day. So if there's a problem with the new power line, they go in the manholes and they fix it. And if there's a problem on the train tracks, they sit around until 1 a.m. So they can only work on the problems they have now between 1 and 4 a.m. when the trains aren't running. So that would be forever. You'd be stuck with that.
The line where they compromised it, they're working on it during the day. That's not 100% true.
Well, yeah.
It's not accurate. They're down there, the guys from Britain, the National Grid, the T. I work for the Housing Authority there, the Essex Street Housing Authority, every day with tons of equipment, clean hours. During the day, still mostly sitting around doing nothing, I'll tell you that. Yeah, during the day, they're working on it. They're building basically bunkers along the train tracks so they can work on it all winter long. They're there working during the day. It's not executed.
Yeah, it would be great if they could run it up the tracks. That's for darn sure. And the other thing is there any obligation for the city to keep city councilors informed of this? If the city, somebody in the city knows about it, or is it only National Grid has to contact every councilor? I mean, at the meeting, they suggested that it was posted at City Hall, but City Hall's closed, and nobody goes down there. So with COVID, it makes it hard for information to flow. So, not to forgive them, and to let Ward 4 councilors know what's going on in Ward 4, but it's I think the city has some obligation there as well.
Can I ask another question? Yeah, ask another question to bring up with National Grid. This is one that really mystifies me. So not only do we have the whole issue with EMFs, but the cost of this project right now is $86 million. We heard EOEA say, hey, you need to raise the substations on either end of this line 15 feet. We heard EOEA and the National Grid's reps say that's going to cost another $100 million. That's $200 million. I just round off, right? That's probably what they do by the time they build it, right? So my question is, as ratepayers, this is not just an issue for people who live on this line, or live along this line that are going to be affected by it. This is an issue for all National Grid ratepayers. How much does your electric bill go up for when you add a $100 million project to it? How much does it go up when you go to $200 million? And at what point does the project become unsustainable? And at what point does it make sense to start looking at other technologies that can make Beverly a leader in resilient energy, like a battery station? So, please ask that question tomorrow, too.
John Allen, 85 Boyle Street. I've been a resident of Ward 4 for over 60 years. I bought 500 feet abutting the East Beverly substation back in 1979, and that's when I attended my first public hearing about the expansions. All I can tell you is this: everybody on here isn't the right thing, but they're working overnight. They're probably working tonight. They're already digging their tunnels. All I can tell you is dealing with them in probably 10 or 15 public meetings, they're very slippery, okay? And that's all I can tell you. Michael, good luck, okay? I don't envy your position, okay, because I've been dealing with these folks for 40 years.
Anybody else?
We've given Mike a lot of homework tonight. I think we should honor the 7:30 to 9 time period unless somebody did not get something really important they wanted to say.
Yeah, please, Gary.
So can we ask you to talk to your city solicitor and look at, a tolling agreement, or who has standing to bring this claim within 20 days, whether or not you can get out of this agreement because of the 180-day delay, and just maybe somehow come back to us with options of what the city has, and and maybe even what that'll cost the city too, because that's obviously a concern of ours as well.
Yeah. So what I can try to do tomorrow is, I've heard a lot of people asking for a pause for more information, including the third-party peer review of their EMF study. I'll go after that tomorrow, okay? And then let's talk some more. Let's see if we're successful at being able to just hit pause right now and get that additional information. There's more that I think many people here want than that. But let's start with that. That make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I think one question that people have here, and I know that I do for sure, I don't think I have not gotten any sense for why replacing the line that's there
Yeah,
now along the train
right,
tracks
that's-
with a new line. Why doesn't that make sense? I don't,
That's the other point. I should have said that aloud too. So let's get them here quicker. By here, if it's going to be virtual, it's going to be virtual. Let's get them here to answer those questions for you as they answered them for us. And, you know, I mean, look, I wanted it down the rail line from the start. I'm willing to go back at that, you know, with you and see if, you know, if we can have better success with it. You know, the question was asked to me, you know, what are we capable of doing given that DPU's, you know, awarded a permit. So let me get cracking on that tomorrow morning and we'll see where we get to. Yes, Alyssa?
Sorry. So, Mayor, thank you for your time tonight. Jimmy, thank you for running around the room. One time frame I heard this evening was the 2-week meeting with National Grid with 1-day response for the appeals process. So that would be the other ask tomorrow, is to move that up, and I think you were just saying that.
Right.
Just to confirm that would be another great ask to get. That's all I have.
Yep.
Run on, Jim.
Thanks. I just want to thank everyone who came tonight on very short notice. I think we got this happening about 72 hours, something. So really appreciate everybody who came out and did a lot of work to prepare. I want to thank the mayor for receiving our irate and emotional and agitated feedback and for hearing all of our demands. I'd like to hear from you, though, whether you can commit something to us tonight that makes you accountable to this group. And I'm curious if you're able or willing to do that tonight. So we don't have a formal process anymore because the process has already gone by. Mm-hmm. And as I indicated both on the Zoom meeting at the EFSB hearing last week and tonight, I feel that process was deficient. We tried to create a record essentially tonight by having BevCam come, by inviting the media to come, and by starting to do community organizing. Like I said earlier, this is the tip of the iceberg. This is who could come on short notice tonight. I think there's a lot of other people that we can agitate to turn out, and we can really do a lot on social media and in the media to create more pressure. I want to know what it is that you are going to commit to do to off-ramp this. So I understand what you said tonight is that you're going to have a conversation tomorrow with National Grid to urge them to come to meet with us sooner. But I am a litigator. I have litigated with National Grid many times. They have paid professionals that are going to come to any meeting, and they will be more prepared than we will be. What can you commit to be showing us that you are going to help off-ramp this or pause this? What is possible? Can you tell us tonight?
I can try. When you say off-ramp, can you just clarify a little bit more?
Can you either put on the record, because on the record last week, even after our city councilors put on the record at the Energy Facilities Siting Board meeting that they had not been adequately informed and that there were process deficiencies throughout. You came to that meeting late and then said, I'm 100% for this. I want shovels in the ground as soon as possible. That's what you said on the record. Mm-hmm. Can you walk that statement back and say, I'm no longer on the record for being shovels in the ground. I want to put a pause on this. And that's one. And can you, using the language that's available to you in the MOA that you signed on behalf of the city, create an off-ramp from that MOA without National Grid?
So to the first, yes, I'll work to try to pause the process so that we can get the third-party peer review. And if it makes sense, that we can try to revisit the rail bid and seems that people want to really look to that. As far as, you're asking me if I read that section a couple of times as we were talking here tonight. I'm going to bring that to the solicitor in the morning. And if we together believe that we can effectuate that, then yes, we'll work to revise and rewrite an MOA.
And just to be really clear on the first point, you will pause pending third-party review. What would cause you to decide to put on the record your position against this route? What evidence would you need to change your position? Because I just want to understand. I don't want to just check a box and do a third-party review. I want to know what standard or criteria we're using to decide whether the city gives its thumbs up to this project.
So that'll depend on what the review shows.
Okay?
That will depend on what the review shows, won't it?
I guess I would hope that there were some standards for public health and the environment that we would be using to judge any kind of independent review by an expert.
I think that's what we look to that third-party peer review expert for, and I welcome you helping me to interpret that or to try to set that down with them.
Okay, so I'm just to be clear, I'm not hearing that we have a standard by which we would review a study at this time.
No. No. I mean, again,
I feel like we're having two different discussions. You're saying you want to see what the study says to establish the standard. Alyssa's asking for a standard ahead of time, and I'm not sure. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just not sure how that can be answered right now. You're saying that. Am I understanding that you're saying you would follow the guidelines of a study that is independent, and that could change your mind?
yes, I mean, I don't have that expertise. I'm not sure who here does, but we've been trying to find that firm, those individuals, that ability to, to give that independent third-party look at the data.
But you have committed to talking to the city solicitor, seeing whether there is an off-ramp. You also are going to ask for a delay no matter what, whether off-ramp or not, a delay from National Grid, because you're going to say you're representing a lot of citizens who feel very, very strongly that they did not get the information they needed. And, we're just wanting to get a feeling that you are leading us and leading us from the front, as well as saying, this has to be looked at more carefully.
Yeah, yeah.
And that would be a change from what some people heard on October 6th, right?
Well, what I said on October 6th. I said what I said. So the idea of pausing is to get a third-party peer review done, one. And I know that there are a lot of questions here about why did they rule out putting the line in the rail bed in the right-of-way. And so the other piece of this right now is to get them before us more quickly, so that can be a significant topic of discussion with all of us. Yeah.
I feel like
I'll be brief, Mr. Mayor. In the memorandum of agreement, section 12, there's a provision that if the city council, acting according to its authority, imposes conditions that National Grid believes are inconsistent with the agreement or unduly burdensome or costly, the parties agree to reopen this agreement for negotiation. So when you're talking with the city solicitor and with National Grid, one thing I do know in my law practice is that leverage makes a difference in negotiations. And I think you can suggest that the city council may well find it within its point of view, shall we say, to force National Grid's hand with conditions. And to be able for you to be able to say that provides you as a leader to suggest to National Grid that it's in their own best interests to go back to the table. So using the leverage of referencing the city council and what it may do, and you have 3 city councilors here who I think share a similar concern and point of view, is a start towards trying to generate leverage in addition to what your other constituents are talking about.
Okay.
I just wanted to add, we've heard a number of times about how National Grid said that it was too difficult to replace the line in the rail bed and that it was too hard to work with the MBTA. And I certainly don't like the inference that the city of Beverly is more pliable than the MBTA. We should not be the path of least resistance for them.
One more thing. We live in a city. I don't think it works anyway. Okay. Yeah, we live in a city where there are plenty of professionals, plenty of registered engineers. I would love to help, but I may have a PhD, but I'm not a registered engineer. If you could somehow collect those people who know the particular issues, who can ask the National Grid the appropriate questions and make an appropriate, recognized judgment, then we'd be a lot further along in getting this project going in whatever direction it's going to go in. So there should be an electrical engineer, a couple civil, environmental, and a few other people. If a call went out for those people, I'm sure you would find within this city plenty of people who are dedicated enough to help out, especially in this review type of a situation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah,
Thanks
thanks,
everybody
Al.
being here, and don't forget reliableenergy101@gmail.com. You can read all the agreements we talked about tonight. Do you have it signed?
Oh, of course, thank you, thank you. Thank you, folks. So you're at 73, where is that?
Hey.